Everyone, welcome to episode 5.
Wow.
I know.
It's
Look at us.
I feel like we've come a really long way in 5 episodes.
Actually, we have come a very long way in terms of, I think, how amazing the set looks. Thank you, Ryan. He's the visionary behind this. And also, I think in terms of how we're putting together our content and just vibing here, it's going great.
Yeah, I've had to learn a lot about video editing and lighting and all that. Like, I'm actually trying out this new setup because, we'll see how it works. I don't know.
It's going to come out great. So, hi, everyone. As always, I'd like to start with a little bit of a market snippet here. As I often say, when you look at the market, it is important to segment the market because the news reports the market as a whole. And when it does this, the nuance, the story gets lost because different segments behave very differently as a result of the demographics of the supply and demand math and segment.
And the media doesn't particularly like nuance.
No, they do not. They like headlines.
Yeah, editorial headlines.
Correct. This was actually the topic of my speech I gave at Rock the Market last week at the Hard Rock. We had record attendance in South Florida, actually.
Wow.
Where we are the largest association in the country by large margin. And I think we're one of the only ones that's gained members this year. And we had over 2,000 people registered, which I think is another positive indicator of the energy here. But anyway, the news that likes to homogenize reality, like to get headlines. And then also many of them, frankly, are jealous because we're getting their taxpayers. So they'll say overall transaction volume down. Well, okay, but that's heavily because transaction volume at lower price points has fallen off a cliff for many reasons.
Okay.
So last week I mentioned how we had record transaction volume this August at the very, very high end. It passed $2,000 a square foot and 1,000 a square foot. That is true. Now, a stat that I find even better, because to me it indicates that the real economic engine is revving up, is that we had year-over-year gains of over 15% in transaction volumes in Miami-Dade for homes priced between $600,000 and $1 million.
Wow.
And that to me is a positive indicator. And it reminded me of the stat that we actually have the most new business applications per capita of any city in the country.
Oh,
and so that 600,000 to $1 million, that's the real market. And it's good to see that there's an uptick in action in that segment.
That's great. And Miami's always been known to have we're always been the city of small businesses and entrepreneurs and stuff. So that's really good to see.
It's a good thing. Another thing that caught my eye this week, I keep talking about momentum cycles and how it's important to understand that the growth and all the building that we talk about on this podcast in Miami is being supported by strong currents, by strong momentum cycles that are just beginning to build. And as our positive momentum builds, negative momentum will, unfortunately for them, keep building in our feeder jurisdictions. They will not reverse course. They're going to double down on losing positions for various reasons. So we had some tidbits in the news this week from the great city of Chicago. Their newly elected mayor, given this exodus of, capital and population, has very wonderfully suggested taxing derivative trading, financial transactions.
Okay.
To find them, they're going to tax the transactions, and he thinks he's going to get some huge amount of money doing this.
Like the mansion tax in LA.
That's in real estate, but this is on financial transactions, right?
Oh, okay.
Which makes it even more absurd because it is easier for these people to leave and transport their servers and their businesses elsewhere than it is for families to relocate. So actually, it's even more absurd. And their other stroke of genius was proposing the creation of government-run grocery stores because they've had a huge number of closings of both Walmarts and Whole Foods across the spectrum. And so now we're going the Soviet Russia model of government rations and food shortages.
I was reading, speaking of grocery stores, I was reading a story, was it Washington, D.C.? Somewhere. It was one of the big cities. And there's one spot that has one grocery store for an entire segment. I forget.
Right.
If it's at Washington, D.C.? And I think it's a Giant or Safeway or something, but it's not in danger of closing, but the community and the politicians are terrified of it closing.
Right.
Because if it closes, it creates a huge food desert.
Correct. Yeah.
And the places around it have closed because of crime and shoplifting. And
Exactly. If half the Walmarts and Whole Foods closed. They just keep closing because it's no longer profitable for them to stay open. That's what they say.
Yeah.
So it's rampant theft. It's all those things. And so if the businesses can't afford to stay open, why would a government store be able to? They can't. So they're going to steal from the government store. We know how this goes. It ends up being food rations. And it's that slippery slope towards UBI, universal basic income, in various segments of the country. And then increasingly incompatible realities coexisting as the country polarizes. And that's part of what will keep driving wealth and talent towards places like Miami.
Yeah. It's, as much people think I don't want other cities to suffer decline. I may be a Miami booster, but I want the entire country to increase and do better. But it just seems like a thing that's just not possible. the way that the country is currently set up, the way that structures are currently set up in other big cities, like, I just look at it and I'm like, listen, I'm not that smart about politics on purpose. I don't understand much about them, but I do understand people, and I understand a little bit about business. And like you were saying, if a business cannot be profitable, it can't be open. And you cannot expect a business, you can't force a business to be open if it's losing money.
Correct.
And it's not just shoplifting that's the problem. There's more to it than that. But for whatever reason, if a business cannot be profitable, like
in this environment, businesses cannot survive for XYZ reasons. People need food.
Yes.
And they're like, oh, government stores. But we know how government stores go. These examples exist all around the world.
Yes.
It never goes well.
People are lining up for food stamps and ration cards
100%. So why would it be any different this time?
Yeah, it's kind of wild. Wow. But like I said, it just, looking at places like San Francisco and LA and all those places, I like those places. I have friends who are there, and I don't think it's a zero-sum game between cities that are doing well and cities that aren't doing well.
Correct.
That's not something I ever believe.
Nope.
I love that I live in a city currently that is on the rise. I like that. But I want to see other cities rise too.
100%. And it's disheartening when you see these models, these templates employed that we know how they end. It's nothing new. Yeah. And it ends up being like a slow-moving tragedy.
And, I read things like The Real Deal and publications from other cities, and every week it seems like these cities people are giving things back to lenders. They're getting foreclosed on.
There's a New York office building. It was the news. Was the Real Deal just now that sold for 25% of what it cost to build. Not what it sold for, but what it cost to build. Wow.
That's just wild. And, a couple of months ago, there was 2 hotels in San Francisco that went back to the lenders, and the mall, the big mall, that just gave the keys back to whoever the lender was. And that's just wild to me, because I always try and personalize things, like that mall in San Francisco, the San Francisco Center. I equate that to Brickell City Center, per se. Can you imagine if Swire was like, okay, Bank of America or whoever the loan is with, take it back? Like, I can't.
What that symbolizes.
I can't process that. And we have dead malls here in Miami. We have quite a few of them because whatever, like Sunset Place and a couple other ones. But they're like out in the suburbs, like they're not trophy properties. And I just think of them, just take it away, because it's worth less than the mortgage that I'm paying on it.
And the implications of that decision.
Yeah, and it's not just the money. It's like, what does that say about, I don't know. I feel like business people don't give up that easily.
No.
Like, people run through all the list of things that they can possibly do, and like that's like the last thing on the list.
Mm-hmm. Correct.
And that's not just San Francisco. It's all these big formerly superstar cities that just, I don't know. I don't know what the answer is.
So what I got asked this recently. Can these cities reverse course? And then we keep seeing politicians doubling down on losing positions. And it's why it seems so obvious. The script has been played out before by all sorts of communists and everyone.
Well, not even communists. I mean, look at like Detroit.
Yes. Detroit had the highest per capita income in the nation in 1960.
Yeah.
And far from it now. And there you can buy a house for $5,000. You can hold it, right?
Yeah.
We have empty. Yeah, no, I know. Things can change quickly. That's one thing.
And I think that's something that maybe something that Miami knows, is that things can change very quickly, because Miami has been for a long time, in sort of a nebulous place where things do change quickly. And we know that. We know that a new political regime locally come in can change everything like that. I feel like people here know that. I feel like people in other cities haven't come to that realization yet, that things are changing much faster than anything. And I'm not trying to be one of those like conspiracy theory people. I'm not like that. It's just like, how can you not see it in front of your eyes?
I've pontificated on this. I believe that most people have recency bias. They think the present is sacrosanct, and how life will always be.
Okay.
And this is not a new phenomenon. People have had this all throughout history, which is funny because history is nothing but rapid change. Just think how 50 years ago. Why would the change be any less rapid? If anything, it could be more rapid because we have immediacy of communication now that we didn't have 50 years ago.
Yeah.
So change could in fact be faster, I would imagine. But even if it's as fast as it was the last 50 years, it's tremendous.
Yeah, it's wild. I don't know. That's when people ask me why I live where I live, it's that feeling because, I lived in San Francisco in 2016 or approximately. And even then, before COVID and all that, it still felt like at that point it was peaking out. You could feel it. You could feel it.
Yeah.
And then when I came to Miami 7 years ago, wild and crazy place, obviously, but it felt like it was still ascending. I think you like using that word a lot.
I do.
Ascension. It still felt like it was ascending, and you can feel that in the energy of a place.
It's a real thing.
And you can feel it walking the streets. Like I saw a video by a guy. I don't know how I fell in this YouTube rabbit hole, but this guy walks around cities in California where all the stores are closed.
Mm-hmm.
And he was the one that I saw. I don't know why. I watched like the whole 40-minute video. Whatever. He was walking around downtown Berkeley, and 80 to 90% of the stores were closed.
Oh.
In like the high street area.
Right.
Not like
some fringe.
Not like a fringe bad area. It was like the main area. And I'm sure it was probably dramatized for YouTube, but from what I could see, it wasn't that dramatized.
Right.
And it was just like 80 to 90% of stores were closed.
That's a different feeling entirely.
And that feeling is both intangible and tangible.
Mm-hmm.
Like you don't have to know data and real estate and whatever to understand that. You can feel it.
You feel it. It's a visceral thing.
And on that same point in Miami, for instance, Flagler Street, which has been desolated for 20 years. Mm-hmm. And it's a disaster currently because it's being renovated. Mm-hmm. But you can feel that it's things are happening. There might not be many open stores there or things happening, but you can feel that it's ascending.
Yeah, slow decay.
Yeah. There's a lot of work to do, but something is happening. I don't know. I like things that are happening.
You feel it. It's a real thing.
Yeah.
You feel when a place is growing, when it's positive. It's a very real thing. Energy is real that way.
Yeah. And speaking of growing, do you know what today is?
I do not.
Today is Brightline Day.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
How exciting. Tell us more about this.
So today, Brightline, after a very long time, did their first revenue service to Orlando.
That's fantastic.
From Miami.
How long is the ride?
About 3.5 hours.
Okay.
And there's a couple interesting things about Brightline. I am a unashamed Brightline fan. That is not a contention. They aren't paying me to say this, but Brightline is, I think it's a landmark thing that's happening. It is the first privately owned railroad operational in 100 years.
That's amazing.
Passenger railway.
We used to have quite nice railways back in the day.
Yes. Yeah. And they were mostly all privately owned.
That's correct. Yep.
And now it's just Amtrak.
Yep.
It's just Amtrak. But
not so glamorous.
It's not so glamorous.
It's a dinner car.
Yeah. But yeah, so Brightline is the first one in 100 years. It was completed in about, I would say, construction-wise, about 10 years, which is pretty phenomenal, I think. And that's including COVID pauses and drama. So more like
2 years,
6 years or so, 6 or 7 years. And here's the interesting about Brightline. Brightline is what is called a higher speed rail. Mm-hmm. It is not high speed. Mm-hmm. High speed is like the bullet trains in Europe, whatever. It's not that. It is higher speed. It runs anywhere from 50 to 125 miles per hour. Mm-hmm. The 125 miles per hour is up near like like up near like Orlando, like that from where Cocoa Beach is to Orlando. That section is 125 miles an hour. Mm-hmm. Down here, it goes from like 50 to 70. Mm-hmm. But it also runs on Henry Flagler's tracks.
Wow.
So the Florida East Coast Railway, excuse me, he built that in the late 1800s. And that is why we are all here today.
Exactly right.
And, the story is that, Miami is the only major city that was founded by a woman, Julia Tuttle. And she owned a lot of land down here. And she really didn't know what to do with it because it was like swamp and mangroves. And so she was smart. She came from Ohio, I think, in the mid 1800s. And she got this land and her husband died. So she was left with all this stuff. And in those days, the only way to come to Miami was via boat. That's how I got here. There was no roads. And she knew that if she could get a railroad here, it would be great. So she tried unsuccessfully for many years to get Henry Flagler to bring his railroad here. It didn't work. He was like, ugh. And then one year there was a freeze in mid Florida and northern Florida, and it killed like
the citrus, right?
Citrus, all of it. The rumor and gossip and creation myth is that she sent Henry Flagler a bouquet of orange flowers that weren't frozen or dead. And that apparently convinced him to bring his railway down to downtown Miami, and actually where Brightline Station is today.
How cool is that?
Yeah. So that whole story is, so those rails were built and they were used for passengers up into about 1960s. Then the Florida East Coast Railway failed because at that time railways were very out of fashion. Everyone was driving cars. So it then converted to like freight, and it was used for freight for the next 50 years. And then many different ownership changes and whatever. And then Brightline, which is backed by Fortress Group, they bought the tracks and the freight company that ran it. And yeah, they literally just, all they did was put stations in.
Right, because the tracks
were already there.
That's amazing.
And it's a pretty cool setup because, I don't know if we talked about it before, but California is building high-speed rail.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. And I think they've been doing it since like the 90s or approximately. Yeah. And now listen, there are very big differences between Brightline and California high-speed rail. California high-speed rail is grade separated. It runs on like a viaduct, and the trains will run at 100 plus miles an hour all the time. But I think I read it was like $30-40 million a mile, something like that.
Something colossal.
Or maybe it was in the hundreds of millions per mile. It's
like made up government money when they price things with no accountability.
Yeah. So now when that eventually runs, it'll be quite the experience if it ever does run. I think they said Brightline was, I need to look it up. It was like single digits per mile.
Far less.
Yeah. And Brightline is obviously not grade separated, and there's issues with that, but it's running and it runs. It works. It runs today, and it ran today from Miami to Orlando for the first time in 100 years.
That is pretty amazing.
Yeah.
Wow. What a great day to be talking about it.
Yeah. I know it. I'm kind of, I want to just take it to Orlando just for fun.
I'm going to be most likely competing in a jiu-jitsu competition in November in Orlando. So look at that. I can take the Brightline now.
And it's the rates start at $79 one way, which I don't think is actually that bad.
The 150 round trip.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because, it's a 4-hour drive. And for the people that can afford it and who it's targeted towards, that is, it's not that bad.
No, I agree.
And if you were flying, it would be the same price, if not a little more. And you have to go through security and parking and
read. You could work. You could do your stuff. You could relax.
Yeah. And have you been on Brightline before?
A while ago. It was quite nice.
Yeah. It's gorgeous.
Yes, I was surprised. I was like,
leather seats and and they like serve you snacks and drinks. Yeah. So
I said, wow, this is the best public transportation I've had in America.
Yeah. It's really nice.
It's
really nice. And, they also have shuttle connections to all 3 airports. The one in Miami, you can take Metro Rail to the airport if you wanted to, but every airport, Miami, Fort Lauderdale, West Palm Beach have connections.
Well, good job, South Florida.
Yeah. And I don't like gloating, but I do want to gloat. Like the fact that Florida got higher speed rail before California did is, to me, that's
an indicator.
That's something.
I agree.
Because California they have the version of like what Tri-Rail is called Caltrain. It's the same thing. It's a commuter rail, not particularly glamorous. And they have Amtrak. Those are the 2 options they have. Both government run. Brightline is private.
And much nicer than Amtrak.
Much nicer. Cool. So
That's a great thing.
Yeah, it is. I'm very happy about it. And I'm very proud that they did it. There was lots of delays, and the Treasure and Nature Coast tried to sue them out of existence. Yes. Sorry. That's where I was going.
That's a very important point.
So here's the important part of Brightline. Brightline was never about the train, which may sound weird. It was always about the real estate that the train unlocked. The area where the Brightline station is now, that now has 2 apartment towers, a massive retail complex, and like 3 office buildings, and they're going to build more. None of that would have happened without the train. In Fort Lauderdale, same thing. They built an apartment building, office building, and like some retail stuff, and same thing West Palm Beach. But the thing is, that was only what Brightline's parent company did. It doesn't include everything around it. So all of those billions of dollars of stuff that I just talked about, that was only the direct impact. The indirect impact from other people around that is going to be mind-boggling.
Correct. It's just begun. It's connecting everything.
Yeah. And now that you can go to Orlando in 3 hours, it's like And then they're working on taking it to Tampa. That's the next stage. And then probably Jacksonville. Yeah. So once that's done, the whole state will really be connected by luxury train travel.
How cool is that?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. Speaking of developments, the neighborhood of the week is, do you remember what I said?
Miami World Center.
Yes, My World Center. It's one of my favorite neighborhoods. So My World Center is a neighborhood in Miami that was originally called Park West. And it was called Park West because it's west of Museum Park. And My World Center really has these boundaries. It is from the Florida East Coast Railway spur to the port, which is directly north of 6th Street, Northeast 6th Street, all the way from 6th Street to 395. And then all the way to the Florida East Coast Railroad tracks on the west. So, and then obviously Museum Park on the east. So within those box areas, you have about probably 60 or 70 acres of stuff. And My World Center is about 40 acres of that. My World Center is a master planned development, which is amazing. I cannot pronounce the guys who were the partners. I apologize. I know one is Art Falcone and something else, but they're OG developers in Miami. They developed a lot of things, but they built the master plan for My World Center probably over 20 years and did all kinds of stuff for the city, whatever. That area of Miami for basically ever was parking lots and dirt. Yep. Behind the row of high rises on Biscayne. Mm-hmm. From Biscayne to the railroad tracks, it was dirt. When I got here in 2017, it was dirt.
I got it 4 years ago. It was dirt.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah. And so, and also there used to be clubs there. A lot of like really popular clubs used to be there, but that was it. And now, so far, there are, I think, 4 or 5 completed towers and a ton on the way. My World Center is neat because it was designed from the get-go to be a pedestrian-connected neighborhood, which I like because, as I said many times before, I like Brickell. I know, I sound like a Brickell hater, but Brickell was designed with no master plan and no collaboration between developers. My World Center had a plan, and they sold off the pieces to different developers, but they had to stick to the
cohesive vision.
So
how the pieces interact with each other, which Brickell feels disjoint.
Exactly. So My World Center is based around like a retail promenade and like a plaza that is on 8th and Northeast 1st Avenue. And it's going to have like a ton of shops and restaurants. Our friend actually has a concept there. They're going to have the first Anthony Coal-Fired Pizzas and BurgerFi combination.
Oh, wow.
First one in the world.
Yummy.
So that'll be pretty cool. And there's going to be a ton of options. I know Maple and Ash will be there. The Museum of Ice Cream is opening up a permanent location there.
A whole lot of cheap days.
Yeah. There's going to be like one of those high-end bowling alley places and like a huge sports bar. But I want to talk about the project. That's what we're here to talk about. So were you here when they had the original Miami Heat Arena? Had they demolished that already?
I think either it was the very beginning, I don't recall.
Okay. So the Miami Heat Arena used to be back further. Right. It used to be back towards the railroad tracks. They demolished it after a while, left it blank. My World Center picked it up. So that is going to be so My World Center, the first phase of it was like 3 to 4 towers and the retail promenade. That was only the first phase. That's about 80, 90% complete. Mm-hmm. We're now moving into the second phase of it. And that will include a lot, like a lot, including that Miami Arena area. There's going to be 3 towers there there's going to be 3 towers, retail, and a specialty grocer there. And that is 2,200 units.
Wow.
In 3 towers.
That's kind of fantastic.
It's wild. And that will, the cool thing about that project is it will connect My World Center to Brightline. Because that is across the street from the Miami Central Brightline station. Yeah, so it'll fill in the pieces right now.
Cool. When you have a plan, you see the pieces fill in.
Yes, I love it.
Wonderful.
It makes me very happy to see that. So there's that. That's on 8th Street and North Miami Ave. That's the Wyckoff. Can't pronounce that. Wyckoff project. All right. So moving east. Have you seen that new tower they built there that has kind of the wave facade? It's called My World Tower 1. They just announced this last week, and I am really excited about this. That project is by Lazarian, and they are going to do 4 towers there, 3 more after the current one. And there's going to be 3 total residential and 1 office tower. But they are gorgeous. The one they just built with the waves, and then the one that faces south on that lot has like sort of looks like the Hearst building in New York, the like diagrid thing. And then the one to the faces west is going to be a taller version of the one that's currently built. And then the shorter office tower that faces north, so you're going to have, east, south, west, and north. The north facing tower will be a shorter office tower.
Right, that we're building office towers.
Yeah.
Other places are selling them for below replacement.
And yeah, I know. Great. Just a little petty. And then so between Wyckoff and Lazarian, that is 5,000 units.
Wow.
That's coming online in the next 3 to 4 years.
It's going back to that stat that we have the most, multifamily units under construction as a percentage of existing inventory in the country.
Yeah. We were number 2.
We were number 2. Sorry. Yeah.
Austin was 1 point above us, but yeah, we're number 2.
It's super good.
Yeah. And then, so those are 2 projects. And then if you go a little bit north, you have Legacy, which is going to be really cool. That is a condo, hotel, and also like a super advanced wellness performance center.
Amazing.
Yeah. It's actually inspired by like the blue zones. Is that they call the blue zones when people live to like be like 100?
Yes.
Yes.
Altitude and all those things.
Like there's
like the Mediterranean.
Yeah, like blue zones. Yeah. It's inspired by that. And then that's also going to have like one of those like Singapore sort of like hanging pools on the very top. It's going to be really neat. And you'll be able to do hotels and short-term rentals there as well. So we have that. And then once we're at Legacy, which is on 9th or 10th, whatever it is there. So if you're there and you're going north on First Ave and you look to the right, you will see a blank lot there that is by AB Capital from Coral Gables. They are doing 2 towers there, 1 residential and one office. And that's like a full multi-use. So you have Legacy, AB Capital, I'm mispronouncing that. And then that lot, the west side of it is the B Capital project, and the east side of it is by, why do these people have weird names? Natalfi, that's a whole other project that also has 2 towers.
Wow.
And then that will be a 2 tower with like 600 units, something in it.
Amazing.
What else is happening over there?
10 years, this is going to be so drastically different.
Yeah, it's wild.
Wow.
And then last, another one. Oh, on the west side of Legacy, there is another project by Lind. I can pronounce that one. That is 2 towers, but it's connected by a sky bridge at the top.
How cool.
Yeah. So, and all these buildings have like spires and stuff.
It's going to be beautiful.
It's going to be really beautiful.
This is one of those things that we're, as a city, fortunate that we were so unbuilt at the start of this shift in our country that we can actually build for the future.
Yeah.
Essentially from scratch.
Mm-hmm.
We have so much, all these building blocks, all these empty lots in downtown, the urban core, that can be just built from the ground up now to accommodate the future. Older cities can't do that. It's very time-consuming, expensive to demolish and build new. It doesn't happen. Yeah,
we're like SimCity. They're just like blank lots.
That's exactly right. I love SimCity.
Yeah, I love SimCity too. I'm very excited. City Skylines 2 comes out this October, and I will be unavailable for October because I will be building cities and City Skylines. My word. Some of the cities I built there, I feel bad for my residents because like they always just turn into like traffic hell.
Yeah.
I just keep adding more highways, doesn't help, which is same thing in real life, but
soon one day we'll have those Jetson style things that take us off our balconies and scoot us to where we're going. When I was a kid, I was obsessed with that. I always wanted to have that. Maybe we'll see it in our lifetimes.
Yeah, we'll be like 70. We'll be like, okay, grandkids, we're gonna come see you on the jetpack.
Your balcony up somewhere? How cool would that be?
Oh, I love it. Oh, so just a couple other things in my World Center that aren't branded My World Center but are still there is you have the 11 district, and that is like in the Park West neighborhood, but it's now called My World Center. There's 3 towers from 11 that are condo residential experiences. There's the first one's called 11, second one's called 11 Beyond, and the third one's called 11 West, and that is like 1,200 units combined with 3 towers. And people who have bought there, like Jake Paul, celebrities.
Right. They sold out very quickly, I recall.
Yeah, they're really expensive, but it'll be like
it's a very good branding project.
Whole experience.
Who wants to live in something branded after a strip club? Apparently, lots of people.
Yeah, I guess so. That would be fun. It'll definitely
room service look like there. That's what I'm wondering.
per our last episode, it'll be like the OnlyFans
the OnlyFans spot.
Yes.
Where I still have a little OnlyFans photo booth. This got to pay rent somehow.
And also inside of there's also next to 11, there is a project from a group called Eden Group, and that's another multifamily. So within my World Center in the next phase, so probably I think it's phases 2 and 3, there are probably 7,000 units.
We're wrapping up phase 1 now.
Yeah, so phase 1 is about 90% complete. There's like only like a few stores that are open, but the construction is done.
Right.
The
hard
construction.
Do you think phase 2 will take?
Probably 5 years. Okay. 5 years or so.
Yeah. So we're looking at 10 years for the whole thing.
Yes. Yeah.
Just not that long, given the magnitude of what's happening.
I mean, I think what took the longest was just getting everything entitled and like the SAP and all that. But now that we're sort of on a roll and that the market is booming, I think it's really
coming.
Yeah. And there's really only like I think 1 or 2 spots left that are like unspoken for that need things. But other than that, from 6th Street to 395, it will be completely solid with new projects, retail.
It's fantastic.
Mixed use.
That's positive momentum, boys and girls.
Yeah, positive momentum. Speaking of positive momentum, today there was an article in the Miami Herald about the developer who wants to replace the Yves Hotel.
Oh, the 1920 structure, yes.
Oh, my word. I almost died when I read that because it was so ridiculous. I don't know if you guys know, but the Yves Hotel was that one downtown that's like right in front of Bayside Marketplace. Had like the green sort of glass on it. Apparently under that, is like 1920s something. And the building is not historic because that conversion to whatever was done in the 60s. So
nobody cared. Yeah.
Nobody cares. But now that they're going to replace it with a 1,000-foot tall thing, Miami Herald wrote a story that was like the last 1920s skyscraper on the boulevard being replaced. And I was just like, I really dislike editorialized things like that.
It gives people a platform in which to indulge their glamorization of the past.
Yeah. And I've always said journalism is important and we need it. I love journalism, but stuff like that, I'm just like, there's no reason for that.
Well, it's not constructive.
It's not constructive. No. It's like they have every right. The building is not historic. No one is going to take the glass things off and restore it to its 1920s appearance.
And then extrapolate out. In 40 years from now, would anybody care at all? No, zero.
Yeah.
And it's not going to accommodate what's happening.
The really funny thing is they were comparing it to the Freedom Tower. Like they were acting like someone was going to tear down the Freedom Tower.
Oh my goodness.
And I was just
not the same.
I know. I was like, it's not the same. It was converted in the 60s. It's probably destroyed underneath anyways.
Sometimes I feel like these things also are reactions to rapid change that sometimes give people anxiety.
Yeah.
And they find like a conduit to try to cling on to what they think is their present because things are happening quickly.
Yeah.
And in periods of rapid change, so it could be anxiety inducing. People see their whole landscape changing. Yeah. And that could be part of it also.
Yeah.
But come on, everyone.
Yeah. And I mean, speaking of that, I posted this today also, a opinion piece from the Treasure Coast about Brightline. And it was this gentleman ranting more or less about Brightline and how it was affecting the Treasure Coast and how blah, blah, and like they were going to have to pay more for emergency services and whatever. And I was like, listen here. Back when they started, All Aboard Florida, whatever, they offered those counties stations. They said, we will put a station here. We will add you to the program. The Stewart County, Indian River, is that what they are up there? All I know is the Treasure Coast, Nature Coast, like those two places. The counties were like, no, we'd rather sue you out of existence and try and block you from doing anything. Yeah. And so Brightline was like, okay, well, we tried. And now that's up and running, they're like, why isn't there a station in Stewart or Fort Pierce or whatever? And I'm just like, oh.
It's amazing.
It's tiring.
It is tiring, and they never see the hypocrisy of it.
It was so hypocrisy. I couldn't.
Human nature. We can't get past it.
Do you want to talk about the the project that they announced yesterday on 8th Street?
Yes, I'm blanking on the name. It's the
Cali 8.
LE8?
Cali.
Cali
Like
8.
Cali Ocho.
Cali 8. Yeah, so it's going to be a whole 200 plus small units.
Yeah.
What's unclear is if they're going to be condos or multifamily or rental. But it seems like we're getting studios and one bedrooms.
Yeah.
And which we need if we're going to deliver something less expensive in the urban core. So when something is small like that, it could be a high price per square foot, relatively speaking.
Yeah.
But still delivered at a price that's more accessible. And I'm a fan of these projects because, again, we're attracting young people to our region.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with small units. I don't know why people in South Florida sometimes have a violent reaction to them, but I grew up in New York City and they're not intended to be a solution for families or for long-term anything, but they're very, very much needed to accommodate young people who are starting out life and who want to get jobs. And for when you're young and starting, the most important thing, you don't need all this room, but you need to be where stuff is happening so you can network and meet people. And so it's important to have housing options within the urban core that are price accessible. So small units are great for this.
Yeah.
So I'm a fan.
And this Cali 8 project is like really coolly designed. It's like, it's a wedge. It's also by the same developer as Aston Martin.
Oh, yes. The family.
Koto
family. Yes, yes.
And it's replacing a gas station.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Funding housing. Because again, we had the largest median spike in rent in the nation. So we need all this stuff. It's great.
Yes. Speaking of rents, I got my rent renewal.
I think you posted it. It was only a $100 increase.
$100 increase. And I was very impressed by that. I'm going to move for other reasons.
It's not egregious.
Yeah. And I was like, wow. Like that is, because back when I got my place during COVID, I lived at Marina Blue and I paid $2,100 for a 1-bedroom. And then when I was next year, they went to $3,100.
Yeah. Yeah. That was that big spike here. Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So to go from $100 up.
It's still going 60% a year. It has slowed down. And we're seeing even now, if we look at listings in the MLS, it's normalizing. Not everything is going at full ask. Things are trending down a little bit. We're stabilizing around new realities, which is a good thing.
Yeah. And I was having an argument with someone on Twitter with this, and my friend Kevin was backing me up. The new units being delivered are putting pressure on landlords.
Good.
And it's fabulous.
It's a good thing.
Yeah.
We had the largest growth in the nation.
Yeah.
Pricing. To go back to normal.
Yeah.
To old prices. But I mean, like that rate is not sustainable. We were squeezed, and a squeeze has to be addressed. And it is.
I'm glad that it's putting pressure on landlords. Yes. It's time.
Yes. And imagine you add supply, you take pressure off pricing. Whoa, supply and demand, everyone. Building works.
And Kevin said something interesting in one of his tweets. He's like, landlords just don't raise the rent as much as they feel like it.
As much as they can.
They raise the rents based on what people are willing to pay.
What they can.
It's not like
people do what they can.
Yeah, landlords are like, I'm going to charge $5,000 because I feel like it. Most of them have some sort of market knowledge and like,
correct.
Okay, I'm going to price it at here because
my neighbor just rented for this.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
But if I have a building and then 500 units just delivered next door to me, I'm going to be like, well, I should probably, if I have a good paying tenant, I should probably not.
And that's good.
Yes.
We needed pressure taken off the market.
Yeah.
So it's a wonderful thing. And it accommodates people coming in. It's a great thing. Listen, I always say, I grew up in New York City. I've been here 11 years. And I rented my first apartment in New York City when I was 20 years old. And renting an apartment in New York City is an awful, painful process. You get PTSD from it.
Yeah.
And it doesn't need to be that way. So I'm glad that we're addressing this with inventory.
Yeah, it's great. I'm starting to look, and I've seen prices start to tick down.
Yeah.
In condo buildings as well. Like they're not collapsing, but they are ticking down.
Correct.
And someone else was saying, well, that's because there's less demand. I don't think so. No. Because these buildings are still like 90% inventory.
Correct. And also with
it's not the lack of demand.
Yes, correct. Also residential real estate. Sometimes a percentage of people in the market don't realize that the spike is over and they're still trying to get highs.
Yeah.
And they're trying to push to a new high, not realizing that it's plateauing around a new level.
Yes.
And that's also what happens. There's a bit of a lag in market knowledge. They get feedback and they have to adjust.
Yeah.
And that's normal. This is all normal market dynamics. It's a good thing.
Yeah. It's great. I'm excited. Well, I'll take you guys along the journey as I look. I'm going to start looking probably the next like 2 weeks or so. So we'll see. I want to live in a condo building now, so we shall see. But yeah, I think that's all the news stories that I had. Lots of good stuff, and I'm excited. I think the next couple of months are going to be great. There's a lot of deliveries coming online, and yeah, it's I'm feeling good about the market here. I think things are stabilizing, which is great.
Things are stabilizing. There's new product coming to market. I think these are all things that I see as positive future indicators that show that we can accommodate growth in the region. as is the Brightline. That's a positive indicator. As is the uptick in transaction volume year over year between 600,000 and a million. All of these are healthy market indicators for me of the real market, not just the fringe, very high end or very low end. That's the meat of the market. And it shows to me that the economic engine of South Florida is a real thing.
Yeah. And I think things like Brightline are going to take it to the next level.
Yep. Agree.
Because the one last thing about Brightline is one of the parts of it is they're going to add a commuter service on the Brightline rails from Miami Central up to Aventura.
Wonderful.
Because Tri-Rail runs west. It runs more in the suburbs. Brightline is right in the urban Biscayne corridor. So that is in progress, and all they have to do is just get the trains for it because the station's already there. So it's a relatively easy connect.
Meanwhile, is New York still trying to build the Second Avenue subway?
Yeah.
Just to say.
But this is something we can cover on later. But the upper Biscayne corridor is primed for explosive growth. Mm-hmm. I personally think.
Agree.
And if you connect transit to it, it's going to be.
The dots are connecting.
Yeah.
It's great to watch.
Awesome. Well, all right, so thank you for being here.
Thank you, Ryan. Episode 5. Hope everyone liked it.
Yeah. Hopefully like this new setup. Let us know what you think. And thanks again for watching.
Send over thoughts and questions, things you'd like addressed.
Yeah. We'll talk to you guys soon.